All right, everyone. Big, warm welcome on this incredibly warm and incredibly sunny day here in Copenhagen. Until we wait a second here, I'll just introduce today's topic. So we will be talking about the first 100 days as a newly appointed commercial leader. And this webinar is for anyone who is within their first 100 days, thinking about having their first 100 days at a new place, or simply wants some fresh inspiration. And when we talk about commercial leader, we're talking about a more senior direction-setting commercial leader. But the webinar is equally useful for those who are supporting these roles. So today we will be talking about how to diagnose, prioritize, and build momentum as a new commercial leader. So let's just get started. So my name is Lisa, and I'm an associate partner here at Quadrant Consulting, and I'm part of the leadership team for what we call commercial transformation. And I specialize within change management and all areas of commercial excellence, and also have supported the leadership transition programs before as well. Let's look at the agenda that we have for the next 25-30 minutes or so. So first of all, what we will be talking about is knowing what you have walked into. And what I've done here is that I have compiled all the really, really good advice that I have received over the years from newly appointed senior commercial leaders, and divided them into archetypes, so you guys get the advice firsthand. Then we're going to be talking about how do you approach your diagnosis, right? When we're a newly appointed commercial leader, within the first 100 days, of course, we don't have to have everything fully figured out, but we need to have done a diagnosis based on which we have a pretty clear idea of what it is that we want to do. Then we're going to be talking about unpacking your mandate. And in a second, we're going to see why that is actually a little bit of a tricky one, right? Because that will allow us to approach change, approach different initiative, approach how we want to drive a transformation, for example, across the organization if it is needed. And then, of course, finally, we're going to be talking about different moves. I have compiled a short list of things that I don't think that you're gonna get hate for if you start with these. And this is what we call quick wins. And then we're going to be wrapping up. So let's just dive into it. So why is it that we need a separate webinar on the topic of newly appointed commercial leadership, newly appointed CCOs? Well, that is because if we take it in comparison to, for example, something like a CFO, right? The more general leadership transition advice applies really, really well there, because within most organizations, a CFO's role is, of course, fairly universally understood. Whereas when it comes to commercial roles, I mean, it can vary significantly. Even on very senior level in different organizations, we see, of course, a title of a CCO, but someone in some companies, it might make more sense to have a VP of marketing or a chief marketing officer, or someone called a head of strategy and commercial development, VP of commercial, head of sales, head of market X, who has big senior commercial responsibilities. And the reason why I just want to have this really crude and oversimplified comparison here, right, is because when we talk about new commercial roles, especially in big organizations, there is, of course, roles that come with the responsibility of running the business, right? So someone who is, for example, head of sales or head of a region. And then there are roles that are responsible for running the business even better, even more efficiently, even more effectively. And sometimes those roles overlap, sometimes they don't. And that means that senior commercial roles like the CCO can be, in large organizations at least, dissolved across. And that means that maybe you're sitting with a head of commercial excellence title, which does mean that you do take responsibility partially for what a traditionally in a smaller company a CCO would do. So that is why we have a separate understanding of what does it mean, what does leadership transition mean within a commercial context. So let's get to that good advice that I was mentioning just earlier. So knowing what you have walked into, generally we talk about three routes to a direction-setting senior commercial leadership. Number one is someone who might be in their role for the first time. Someone likely with really high energy and drive and the ambition to sort of change things, shakes things up, right? So it's your first time direction setting, first time executive role. And this is one of those where a little bit more generic leadership advice applies incredibly well, right? Because this is where, since you're the first timer in this role, you need to be very careful to build up credibility within your executive peer group before you start to push things to change, right? And it is of course very nice to be ambitious, and it's very important as well, but also allowing yourself time to sort of arrive in a situation where you need to work through others instead of doing everything yourself. And that can be quite a big shift for people moving from a senior manager, director to a more C-suite role. So that's the first route. The second one is an incredibly common one. So someone who arrives at a CCO or senior commercial role promoted from within. And the overwhelming opinion here is that this is very much a blessing as much as it's a curse, because you of course have the understanding of the culture, history, the strength, the knowledge, the know-how. However, you need to be very patient, right? Because this is one of those where you might see some super obvious things that you would want to change because you've been in the company for a long time. But again, your first 100 days are not necessarily the time to do that. So again, exercising restraints and patience also works. However, you also need to be careful not to have the group think of course, this is how we've always done things, so this is how we're going to be doing things going forward as well. And then the final one is a quite common one as well, which is a CCO or someone in a senior role brought in from the outside, sometimes with a very clear mandate of changing things. So here, a lot of times, the expectations that you have based on what you were sold the role to be, likely by a recruiter or someone else, they can be quite different. So the overwhelming advice here is to do your due diligence early and get super deep into the data as much as possible, even before your role. So you have already some sort of preconceived ideas even ahead of your first 100 days. So across each of these three roles, there is three challenges that hit every new commercial leader, regardless of what has, of course, brought them here. I'm going to go through them and give you the advice on what I heard works and what I've seen works. Number one, and this is something that I already mentioned, is this huge pressure to form opinions before you should. So one of the things that newly appointed CCOs tell me is that already on day 10, the CEO will want to know, what is it that you think? And your instinct, of course, you want to be a really good colleague, so you want to share an opinion, right? But having the vulnerability and having the restraint to say it is too early for me to form an opinion on this matter and I'm investigating this is a superpower. So it is something to really come back to. Of course, if it goes over a very extended period of time, and here I'm thinking over 3 months, right? That's a problem, because you should definitely have an opinion, but not on day 10. Number two, what people get surprised by is how the existing rhythm pulls you in much faster than expected. So you basically are dragged into business as usual very quickly, more quickly than people would expect. And the advice here is to make sure that you create two separate tracks. So if you're someone who is responsible both for running the business and running the business really well and efficiently, then have two separate tracks in your head, because the performance of the company is not something that you can just ignore because you're doing a transformation or you're doing some sort of change initiative. So separate the two. And then number 3 is the most frustrating one. And that is, of course, because a lot of times you will see changes that need to be made, but even the most obvious ones are going to be much harder to sell than you would have expected. And we're gonna get back to this one. The advice here is to find the really true quick wins, the low-hanging fruit, before you start to embark on your $1 million idea on how things should be. So with that, of course, before you decide what it is that you want to change, you need a clear diagnosis of what is broken, and I would say just as importantly, why it has stayed that way. So let's head on to some approaches in your diagnosis. A good diagnosis requires 2 very different mindsets, and a really good senior commercial leader is able to do both. And that is what I call the mechanic, and for lack of a better word, the psychologist. So the mechanic is someone who looks at the commercial operations, the commercial engine room, the way that a car mechanic would look at a vehicle. So super systematically working through each component, incredibly structured, where performance is leaking and what might be causing it. So performing a mechanical root cause analysis. And this is something that, especially if you have good commercial experience, you can sense, you can see this type of company is likely going to be facing this kind of issues. So I go through it step by step and check through everything. Of course, the real world is much more messy, but taking this mechanical head on will allow you to have a fairly good diagnosis on what is actually broken. Then, of course, we know that the mechanics analysis tells you what needs to change, but it doesn't tell you why things are the way that they are or why they have stayed this way, especially if they are so obviously broken. And a lot of times what you will find is that the root cause is about people. So people not wanting to do things differently, or people not believing that things should be done differently. So let's look at some advice here. So when we look at the mechanic, the goal, again, is not a fully comprehensive analysis, right? Because you would completely drown. But based on your experience, based on what you know from within the company or what you've done before entering the company, testing a few hypotheses that, if they fail to be disproven or confirmed, they will point you into the right direction. So here are 5 hypotheses that I would test at almost any company if I were to start. Number 1, the business is overinvested in defending existing accounts relatively where demand is growing and where we actually have a genuine right to win. So I would start by testing market sizing by customer segments, and then also on the back of this set up concrete growth lanes with actions. So it's a very simple where to play, how to win type of exercise before sort of heading into, yes, of course, this is where we need to do things differently. So number 2 is that we have a meaningful share of our customer base that is unprofitable to serve at the current cost to serve level. And that is simply looking at the accounts that we have and the sales coverage. And we are looking at, are we delegating in the best way possible across these accounts, or are there accounts that we're not even making money on and we should just completely self-serve and digitize? Number 3, is a pretty easy one also to make, is that commercial productivity per seller is completely held back by an overload of admin work and or capability gaps. So that is, of course, something to check on, check the tech stack, check the tools, and check the sales capabilities. Number 5, this is another one. I bet you that sales management structure is built around tracking lagging performance indicators rather than improving leading ones, which means that average performers stay average longer than they should. So this is around sales management and performance discipline. And then number 5 relates to pricing. That is basically that there is a pricing governance problem. So there is margin erosion concentrated in a very small number of sellers and deal types, and that is something that you can analyze across. So these are 5 sort of, for me, no-brainer hypotheses that you can test, but depending on what type of company are you entering, right? Are you entering something, or are you becoming a leader in something that is more of a complex sale, right? Or something that is a little bit more transactional? They will require a different set of hypotheses, but set these up and go through it just like a car mechanic would with a car. Now, the other very important thing that a lot of people skip within their diagnosis is to truly understand the organization's sort of pulse, readiness to change, organizational health, and the people. So here are 5 questions that I found during a diagnosis on the people side that can really open some good conversations and can give you some really good knowledge on what the change readiness is. So these 5 questions: how long have you been here and what made you join? When have we truly worked together as a team? What made that possible? What have you changed your mind about in the past in how we run the business, right? What are the organization's relationship with change? And if you could change one thing, what would it be? So they have 5 set of questions, and then listen and ask them to tell you more and be curious. So the mechanic and the psychologist, that's the diagnosis. Then let's move on to unpacking your mandate and different change approaches. And when it comes to your mandate, right, we spoke about that it can be a little bit messy, right? Even as a title of a CCO, what exactly is your mandate? How are you sitting? Are you sitting above markets, or are you in some sort of global head of excellence? Something like that. So before you know what to start with, you need to know what your mandate is. There are 2 sort of pitfalls here. Number 1, incredibly common, overestimating your mandate. So this is one of those where I see time and time again, just because you say so, just because you say that this is how something should be, doesn't necessarily mean that people will do it that way. Because you simply don't have the mandate over them. And that's of course a problem, because that means that you need to take a little bit of a different approach. The other side of the coin is underestimating your mandate, and that is sort of how do I put it? It's apologizing even before you have tried something, right? So a lot of times the commercial space across organizations becomes super fluid. And that means that you can actually, with a really good plan, claim quite a lot around the sort of traditionally CCO role, or even as head of excellence. You can make quite big changes as long as you come with a good plan. Super simply, the question, do you have the mandate or not? It's a pretty much of a yes or no question. If you have the mandate above people, that of course means that you can hold people accountable against KPI and have the carrot or the stick to make them behave or go into the direction that you set. So with this, there are overall 3 approaches that you can take when you are thinking about your first initiatives. And this goes for anyone leading, I want to say almost any sort of initiative, any sort of transformation program. It can, of course, be a combination of these three. So number one, if you have a super clear mandate and you have a big need for speed, or you have completely big need for speed because people have been asking for something for a really long time, then just do it. Set the direction, mandate something, roll out something mandated top down, and then have people implement and have people structure. Option two is that this is for a little bit more for those sort of dotted line CCOs, senior commercial leaders, where you're probably sitting in some sort of carved out global function with an overview of the different markets. If there's a high resistance for change or fairly high autonomy, but you really have the sort of right direction going forward, then this is where we set the frame. So a set of design principles, for example, and then within that we co-create. And that is ideal for high resistance. And then option three, I would recommend if you have this can work in a really big organization where you have super strong regions, for example. If you're not that big of an organization and you have very, very strong regional leaders, then this can work as well, as long as then the work does get done and the performance does improve. So within these, we get to the speed of change. And when it comes to the speed of change, we ask, what is it that you want to start with? What I would do is that I would, based on my mechanical analysis, I would have a list of things that I believe both on the operation and on the structural side would make sense to change. And I would basically divide them into three different buckets. Number one is the speedboat, so something that is directly within my control, something that can be fixed relatively quickly and with a visible near-term impact. And this is some of the more operational things, right? So, for example, in a smaller company, it could be as super simple as the company presentation or the sales process, or it is some sort of smaller operational initiative that will have quick, immediate impact. So, for example, looking at account profitability that we spoke about before. Then there are what we call the tugboat moves, and those are sort of maybe bigger organizational, structural things, strategic things. So, for example, how do we organize our accounts across different roles? What roles do we even want to have on our team? And they have an impact quite a bit down the line. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a list of these. It just means that you need to actually have them ready. So when you do want to see impact 6 months, 12 months down the line, then you have already set these in motion. So speedboat, tugboat, and then there's the most underappreciated one, which is very good advice. It's what we call the no move. So what makes successful CCOs very successful a lot of times is knowing what to put away into a different bucket and just not touch, because it might be completely draining the energy of the team. And maybe it would get caught up in an IT death trap, or simply it's just not worth the struggle. No shame in that. So the most overwhelming advice that I hear and what I can pass on to you is start with the quick win. Start with something that is directly within your control. So something where you don't need 100 different sign-offs, opinions, something that slows you down, something directly within your control or within your team's control. And then number two, is the organization already asking for it? A lot of times, if you actually go around and talk to people, you will have a pretty good sense on what are the things that they would love to see changed. So a true quick win will always be something that you can control and something that the organization is already asking for. So as we approach the end, here are 5 quick wins that come up repeatedly as a good idea. Number 1 is account profitability, and you can look at this, of course, now with using any AI platform or cloud. But as long as you have the data, you can do a pretty good account profitability analysis, and then see which of your accounts actually generate your revenue and which of from the long tail maybe we should not even be serving. Number 2 is performance management cadence. So if your company doesn't have a good performance management cadence set up, and it is something that is within your control, I would recommend that you set up a good cadence. Number 3, value propositions, a super underrated area. I've seen value propositions become incredibly muddy in bigger, more complex organizations. So sort of streamlining, cleaning that up can be a superpower. Number 4 is the incentive model, is also a very popular sort of start for new CCOs. And of course, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. So a lot of times, for example, cross-selling is something that is actively disincentivizing companies. So make sure to take a look at that. And then finally, pricing discipline, which we already spoke about, testing the hypothesis and testing and seeing, are we actually disciplined or are we overly discounting on certain customer segments or within certain seller groups. So with that, a lot of advice across some different areas. So let's just wrap up quickly. So how to spend your first 100 days as a newly appointed senior commercial leader, or how do you best support someone? Before you even move, know what you have walked into. So either you are first time in a direction setting role, so be patient with yourself and also just sort of be ready for the shift of doing things through others instead of doing everything yourself. Number 2, of course, if you are promoted from within, you may see the obvious changes that need to be made, but they might not be so obvious to others. Or on the other hand, don't be bogged down by groupthink. Number 3, if you come externally, know what you have walked into, get access to data, get access to key people even before your start date. We have also talked about 3 typical challenges, and the one that stands out again is don't form opinions too quickly. Day 10 is not your is not the time yet to say this is exactly my plan and this is what I want to do. Number 2, running your diagnosis. We have had 5 sort of no-brainer mechanical hypotheses to test. They're probably different for your business, but I hope that these gave you a fresh start, a head start. And then remember to also have your psychologist hat on to understand the organizational health and change readiness. Number 3, understand your mandate, and then choose your implementation initiative driving approach to match that. And then number 4 is sort initiatives into your speedboats, quick operational fixes, tugboats, bigger structural changes, and reserve the no move for those that would just completely drain your energy and would be impossible to implement. And remember that a true quick win is something that you have directly within your control, something that the organization is also asking for. And with that, I would like to thank you for your time. And if you're heading into a next meeting, good luck on your next meeting. And please feel free to reach out with any potential questions, anything that is more context specific, something that you might be anxious about going into your new role with. And thank you so much for today.